A bit of feedback. So there are no fire drills planned for tonight.
Excuse me, Chair. We had this last night. The microphone next to you didn't give the feedback and it wasn't picked up on YouTube. There were 2 or 3 microphones that were quite bad. One behind me, that one, but it did settle down after 20 minutes. I went back to it. Okay.
Is that better? Cool. All right. Yeah.
I'll try the microphone. Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Members, so the application site is on the corner of Kingston Road and Palmerston Road within Wimbledon. The site currently comprises a 2-storey building, currently has a cafe on ground floor and yoga studio at first floor. The site surroundings is largely residential to the west, north and to the east. Opposite is also residential, but there's also commercial ground floor properties as well. Through the existing plans, as I said, there's a cafe at the moment. It's slightly set in from the boundary with some storage units here and also some car parking at the back. First floor level, as I said, yoga studio. The building was extended very slightly back in a while back. Looking at the existing street scene, so this is existing building on site here. As I said, 2-story. It is of a period property, along with the host other two remaining terraces. Has a sort of existing butterfly roof, we call it, at the back. Looking on Palmerston Road, which is largely 2-story housing, commencing here. Turning to the proposal itself, it is for a full redevelopment of the site to provide 7 flats. So talking through the proposed ground floor plan here, a 3-bedroom unit would split over 2 floors, access from an access off Kingston Road. The remainder of the flats will be accessed off Palmerston Road here. At ground floor level, there would also be communal refuse storage and also bike storage. Soft planting has been allowed for towards the frontage here. And also rear garden area at ground floor for that ground floor flat. Looking as we go up in the building, first floor, the one bed unit here on the corner, and the remaining 2-bed units throughout. Each flat would have an outdoor amenity space. And as the building goes up, you'll see that the building design has been staggered inwards, really helping break up the bulk and mass of the building and add to its design. So this is the 2nd floor, the 2 flats here, and then the last flat is sited at top floor level, again set quite far in from the surroundings. Solar panels are proposed throughout the entirety of the flat roof at the top floor level. I think it's 27 in total as part of the energy strategy for the building. So turning to elevations, we'll see that the building to the west of it is a 2017 development. They've taken sort of design cues from that building, albeit at a lower height. So the proposal includes London stock brick with zinc cladding for the building and aluminium frame windows and glazed balconies. Looking at the rear, Palmerston Road elevation, so you'll see it's staggered as it gets higher, going away from the 2-story character which commences on Palmerston Road. This level is also set back from the 1st floor level. Turning to looking inwards at the back, some section drawings really just assist with showing the sort of external balconies at the back and at the front. As outlined before, refuse storage, communal area at ground floor level and bike storage. The ground floor flat at the back would have its own bike storage in their rear garden. Just a cue on materials and sort of intentions on landscaping. So as outlined at the front, there is space for some soft landscaping. This is a building near, I think, Griffiths Road in Wimbledon, where this has been achieved. And really just some design cues on materials. The applicant submitted some 3D visuals as part of the application to assist in the context, so existing above and proposed below. So from Kingston Road, the site's on the right-hand side, and the flats opposite, known as Vortex Apartments, are there opposite. So really a key aspect of Palmerston Road. So this helps put it into context in terms of the stepping back as the building goes up. The front amenity area here has been allowed for soft landscaping, which is positive, and also under here, under the overhang. Looking at the rear, so they have staggered the building line as it goes up, angling away from the adjacent unit here. There's a split level flat next door at 113. There's a consent pending for extensions at roof level and out the back to create it to 2 flats. That hasn't been granted consent yet, but that's been referenced in the report. There's a shared accessway at the rear serving other properties. This scheme would build across their own parking area at the back, but not encroach onto this access way. And quite useful from above, really just showing how that design is proposed. On-site photographs. So this is the site here on the left-hand side. So as you can see, there's the modern development opposite. So the site is from here onwards. Looking at the rear, there's the neighbouring flats here. The property nearest in Palmerston Road here. You'll note in the report, this window serves a hallway. The house has been extended here as well, 2 stories, so it's a fairly blank wall here. And there's the property again. There's the street scene aspect here. So you can probably just see it, that the parking area at the back here, so the scheme would extend to its boundary over this aspect here. The site does currently benefit from a sort of side area, which is sort of used as a walkway and a sort of a shed towards the rear. So they do benefit from some side ground, which they're looking to extend into as part of the scheme. But draw members' attention now to the modifications sheet, where we have just a few extra conditions recommended in the table set out on the spaces for the individual flat units. Overall, Chair, officers consider this to be a good use of a small site within Wimbledon. It's just been designed well, considering the constraints surround the building. So therefore, officers recommend permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Questions for the
Better? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yes, so why don't we open up this item to questions, take 2 at a time. And so we've got Dan first, and then just take Dan, go for it.
I had a question about the waste. I note that the waste facilities are mostly in the communal area for the 2 and 1 bedroom flats. Where do the 3 bedroom flats waste? Where would that go? Would they have to walk outside the property all the way in to the other entrance to dispose the waste in those communal areas, or would the waste go somewhere else?
It's a good question. Anyone else want to say anything on that at all before we open up? No? Tim, do you have enough details to give a firm answer?
Yes, Chair. I believe that the waste is all in the communal area. So for the 3-bed unit, they would have to walk outside and around the side and into the communal space.
Go for it, Dan.
Isn't there a risk that that's a bit poorly designed, and that what's more likely to happen is to leave waste outside on their front doorstep, which will be a magnet for foxes, vermin, etc. Is there any way we could try and condition some kind of waste facility to be next to the 3-bedroom property? Because I know human behavior very well, especially with communal estates. No one's really going to go on a long journey. And they'll also have to have keys to access the 1 or 2 bedroom properties, communal areas, minimizing their safety as well. Is there anything we can do in this regard?
Can I just jump in there? So could you then just expand a bit more on the risk you're suggesting we mitigate from this? Because it's from lived experience. So if you can just understand that a bit more.
People would leave their waste on their outside their front door. And if you create an overly burdensome experience, if it's overly burdensome for someone to dispose their waste, they'll often do the easiest thing and just put it on their front door, outside the front door. That's what you see happen again and again, especially in places with communal waste features. And so, is there anything we can do to make the waste storage facility for the 3-bedroom flat be closer towards where they are? Because not only will it minimize that probability, but it will also mean they won't need access to the communal areas of the 2- and 1-bedroom flats, which is if they don't, which might, if there's no need for them to access those communal areas, they wouldn't need to have a key. So the one set keys less, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so I'm looking at the floor plan here. Let me just share my screen. It would be useful for discussions. So, yes, you're right. So the 3-bed unit accessing here, looking at it, there potentially could be space for the smaller, or the normal size wheelie bins here, but you would sacrifice the sort of soft landscaping aspect. And the good thing about the soft landscaping, it just gives a bit of relief to the busy Kingston Road for this bedroom and these other bedrooms. So whilst there might be space for it, it would potentially become a detriment of that bedroom window there in terms of the sort of outlook. It's not too far a walk round. I appreciate what you're saying, but I think it, as Chair said, potentially it could be a question for the applicant if that was a particular sticking point, but it may affect the outlook on that window and the soft landscape.
I think also it's challenging to have. I think it's challenging to have the bins just outside the window there. But let's bring the applicant in as well. And I know Matt had a question as well. So could you just comment on some of the thinking behind that placement and some of the logic and experience that would tend to lead the waste positioning being as it is in your design?
You can't actually get into the other flats from there. There's their own separate door where you get to the bins and the bikes only, no other flats. So there won't be really a security issue for the other flats. Regarding the location of the bins, I've done other developments within the borough where I kind of had the setup where there was a flat by itself with its own entrance and I put the refuse next to it. But the planning department didn't like that, and they wanted it all in one area because it's easier for the refuse collectors to collect, basically. So I would, it makes sense for it to be over there, but I've been, told in the past that it all needs to be in one area, basically.
Thank you. So it's us being consistent with the guidance too. I understand. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. I think that mainly answers it because it looks like everyone's going to have to go out and fob into the bins. So I think that's clear now for me. Thank you.
Cool. And thank you. I think it's a valid point down, Kirsten.
I just wanted to ask, what's the strategy? Will the wheelie bins, because I live in a flat currently, and we wheel the bins on the pavement. Luckily, there is ample space that is not used as a pavement that we can leave it on. So what's the strategy here? Are our contractors going to go into the building and access the bins, or where are they going to be left when it's collection day?
I think that's a good question. I think, Tim, we've got comments from our waste officer on that. Do you want to, any chance you can expand briefly on the practicalities?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so on the floor plan here, so the bins will be stored here. So there is a large entrance door here. There's also the overhang space here. So on collection day, the idea is that they would be out here for collecting, and then down the existing drop curb here, and then they'll be put back by the refuse vehicle bin collectors. So there is There is space for them. The two Eurobin size is more than the guidance requirement for 7 flats. So the two proposed is the sort of acceptable size for the 7 units. But we think, given the sort of small site constraints, we think that's a reasonable solution here, and also for collection on Palmerston Road rather than trying to do something off Kingston Road itself. So that's the sort of thinking behind that.
One follow-up and then let's move on.
It's just, sorry, because it's a dual use, that entrance to the bicycle storage, I think it will conflict personally. But if no one else has great concerns about it, we'll leave it to who has to experience it in the long run. Sorry, obviously I'm coming from my background as an architect and inclusive design advisor. So if I was on the design team, I'd be asking them to improve that experience, because it is, like it was raised. There's already an issue with the other neighbors, but if you combine those uses, then if you look at it, the bin is either in front of the main entrance or in front of the entrance to the recycle bin area and the cycle parking. So there's a conflict, I think, there, unless they can put it on the pavement, which they can't.
Thank you. I mean, design and inclusive design is a very important aspect to consider. All right. So, any other questions on this? Last one, Dan, and then we'll move to comments.
Is the soft landscaping protected so that if over the lifetime of this development, if we find out that resident behavior is not what we expected, would it be later on possible to change the soft landscaping into a wheelie bin area, or would that breach a planning condition? Would that be possible, basically?
Chair, the soft landscaping condition we have for developments, they do protect landscaping for 5 years. That's the standard condition that we use. So it seeks to protect it for 5 years. Technically, should someone put a wheelie bin on the soft landscaping, it won't need planning permission in its own right.
Can I? Yeah, I think ultimately the challenge is whether it will be collected or not, given the official waste route is how it's outlined. I mean, a lot of this, I think, probably will be picked up more on the casework, and I'm afraid, in the sense that you don't know until you practically have something there, human behaviour. And if there is, then no doubt our waste team will be as responsive and work to make amendments if necessary. From my reading and from what I've heard and the feedback we've had, I think the behaviour of those who will be in these buildings will be aligned to the waste route. But let's see the practicality, and if that changes, then we'll need to update our thinking on how these things are designed. Any comments? Anything else to add, Matt?
I just wanted to say that looking at the proposal, it's a very good quality. It makes use of a hard to lease space, taking visual cues from across the road. So I think it's a really good example of the infill development that is called for in the emerging local plan in Merton. I had a question, it's not a question now, but I emailed a question in advance to officers about the 3D renders. And I just wanted to put on record that the officer said, because it's a computer generated model, that it often improves reality. And I don't necessarily think that we should just accept that as a committee or as a planning department, because I mean, I managed to get down there, but not everyone does. And the renders give almost every other house on the street a paint job to match the development, which isn't going to be happening because it's not in the site allocation. So just want to put that on record and say that obviously, I think it is of good quality, but it's not necessarily what will be in the 3D renders.
Noted. Thank you. No more comments? Okay. Ed and then Sherry-Ann.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have to say, when I looked at the pack and knowing that corner with the existing building, it's quite pleasing to the eye. However, I saw the look in the book and thought, oh, we've got a concrete block. But actually, when you go online and look at the colour, as has just been said, it's a very tight, interesting space, that on the corner, the way it tapers in. And what Kirsten said, especially with her architect's hat, the bikes, I think it's such a small site that a lot's been done with it. And I think it's actually a very good use of the space, actually. And I like it more probably from the back and Palmerston Road than I do from the front. But I think it's quite a good design. Quite like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point, Sherry-Ann.
Sorry about that. The concluding comment for me is just it's really great to see the amount of cycle spaces they fit in, essentially what Councillor Foley said there too. And it's also really good to see, really welcoming to see the sort of provision of 3 and 2 bedroom units, prioritization of that, as it's much needed in the borough, is really welcome.
Thank you. I think those points would echo my own as well, and also just mirroring the design opposite to be in keeping with neighborhood as well. So we start to get more consistency. It's very thoughtful, where otherwise it could have gone in a different direction. Okay, I'm confident to bring this item to a vote. So the question on the all the paper is that we recommend the scheme. Can I have those voting against? None. All those not voting? 1. All those voting for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this application is passed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending as well. So let's move on to the next item of business. So that's 310 to 356 Grand Drive. And it's Wendy will be presenting this item. Just a wee changeover. Wendy, please present the application.
Okay, good evening, members. So this site comprises a 4-storey mixed-use building with commercial uses on the ground floor. This application has been submitted under Part 20 of the General Permitted Development Order for new dwelling houses on buildings in mixed use. So the scheme is for an additional story to the existing 4-storey block to create 6 new flats. Access will be as existing. With regards to design, the additional story will be finished in materials to match existing. With regards to transport matters, due to site constraints, the required cycle parking cannot be accommodated within the site, and the applicant has agreed to pay a financial contribution to provide off-site cycle parking. So with regards to refuse, it has been identified there to be capacity within the existing refuse stores to accommodate the refuse and recycling storage requirement for the new units as well as the existing. An indicative plan has been submitted and included on page 3 of the mod sheet to show the location of the proposed additional refuse store. Details of the refuse management plan has been secured by a pre-commencement condition. So overall, the proposal has been assessed to comply with the technical and design criteria set out under the relevant part of the order, and it is recommended that prior approval is granted subject to conditions and a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the necessary contributions and obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. We haven't got any objectors or councillors speaking on this item. We do have Thomas Rumble, who I believe is here, who will speak on this item for 3 minutes. Thomas.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Well, as you've heard from your officer, the site forms brownfield land and benefits from the permitted development rights granted under Part 20 of the GPDO to allow the erection of additional floors above the existing building. These rights are further supported by the London Plan and the MPPF that encourage upward extensions to meet minimum housing needs on such brownfield land. The relevant prior approval considerations are thoroughly reviewed in your officer's report, but to summarise, a parking survey has been undertaken and demonstrates that the proposal will not cause undue parking stress. This is further supported by the London Plan that encourages car-free development. The additional floor will match the existing 3 levels below, with windows vertically aligned and material treatments to match. In addition, all flats meet space standards and a dual aspect, ensuring an appropriately designed scheme, both externally and internally. The site is a substantial distance away from its neighbours to the west and east, and comfortably exceeds commonly applied development management standards. In respect of refuse, a meeting was held between the Council's Environmental Services Officer, the Planning Officer, ourselves, the new managing agent earlier in the week. A number of options for providing some additional waste storage capacity were discussed, including the ability to encourage greater recycling levels. This will be secured through the suggested refuse and recycling condition, and the Environmental Services Officer is content with the proposals. The freeholder will do all they can to minimise disturbance during the construction process, and a construction logistics plan and working method statement are required by the suggested conditions. The works are no different to found on many upward extension projects throughout the borough. The applicant has undertaken lengthy dialogue over an application process comprising 6 months prior to this committee. And to conclude, the application represents one that will maintain the character and appearance of the area whilst releasing 6 new flats onto the local market. This results in your officer's recommendation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I'll just call Wendy back in if she wanted to come back on any of the anything what Thomas said. No? Okay, super. So we'll just open the floor to questions. So we've got 3 questions already. Dan, Matt, and then Jill.
I had a question about the parking restrictions. This is a very low PETO rating. It's in fact described as poor. So why, and there is excess parking capacity that has been identified. So what is the logic behind restricting parking for this development when it has a very poor PETO rating and there is the parking capacity? And B, with this restriction in the event of a future CPZ coming into force, is there a sunset clause for this? Or can you remind me how long these planning conditions last for? Thank you.
And I will take one more question from Matt.
I agree with everything Dan just said. And also, I want to thank you, Wendy, for applying to me about the informative that you said you can recommend advising the applicant to ensure that water supply and utilities to the existing flats are maintained during course of construction. So can I just check, is that in there for us to vote on today?
Just hold that there because questioning was a similar line to Dan, Jill.
More about, is there any provision for EV charging points at all built in? And if not, can we get that configured in now rather than worrying about it that we didn't? Thanks.
Thank you. So two good questions with a point about clarification. So I think it'll be good to hear about parking restrictions given the site and future CPZ, and also about the any further funds to support EV charging given its location on its prime location on that high street there. And then obviously confirming Matt's point as well, but we'll come back on that probably a bit more, exploring that in conditions section.
So with regards to the parking, whilst the survey demonstrates there is capacity to accommodate the potential additional parking requirements generated from the scheme, but just to safeguard potential increase in pressure, the applicant has agreed to restrict the future applicants from applying for residence parking permits in the event a CPZ comes into force in the future. This is just a safeguard mechanism to ensure there is no additional parking stress generated by the development in the event that the CPZ. So then it's like so we're retaining the similar situation. So there's no increase in parking pressure.
Can I just add on that? I mean, you know, it is our decision on that condition, so we can ask it to be removed, and that would mean then future, if there is a CPZ, then obviously these residents will have the right to have that, or we can maintain it there. So it is entirely committee's call on that as well. So I'll just leave you to think about that for a second, the consequences or otherwise of that decision. And then we've got Jill's question as well about EV charging and support for infrastructure just immediately outside, given its prime location.
Because no on-site parking has been provided, we haven't actually asked for an electric charging point. The officers don't think it's relevant to this development at this stage because of the absence of on-site parking. And
Actually, yeah, can I just throw that question to Thomas in a sense of what exploration or discussions have there been had in relation to a provision of an EV point immediately outside, whether it for the immediate residents or for the community? Just it'd be great to understand the thinking.
Yes, of course. I mean, as your officer says, that because there's no parking available on site at all, you couldn't provide a charging point to actually serve an on-site parking space. And the intention would be in that this is obviously a zero parking scheme. So it would generally, I believe, fail the SIL regulation tests in relevance terms to this application to ask for one. So that would be my feeling on it.
Okay, so I'm just conscious that you've made a contribution in terms of cycle parking. Just generally, how do you cross that test when you've not got cycle parking yourself?
Well, I think that whilst the London plan would typically encourage car-free development by policy, it would always encourage cycle parking. Hence the reason that would be a justified contribution in regard to the SIL regulations, and I believe would generate around £10,000 of investment in cycle parking infrastructure. So that's where the difference would lie.
Thank you. It's good to inform the committee of thinking behind it. Another round of questions. Dan, Ed, and we'll do Dan, Ed, and then back to Matt.
I mean, I don't think my question was answered about the sunset clause, for the CPZ.
There isn't one.
So it would be in perpetuity, these flats would never. And it's my understanding that the planning policy framework that restricts car-free developments are if they have good transport links. The word used here was poor. I don't think poor and good are the same thing. Could there be some kind of tick for tat whereby if this is no longer a car-free development and we allow parking for these new flats, could we then perhaps secure a contribution for EV charging off street? Is that something that could be possible if we allow parking to occur? And this, so I wanted to go back on my first question on that, but also it just is asserted this place cannot accommodate cycle parking. Why?
Can I break that up into two? So I'll answer the first question in a second. The latter one I think is a great question that we need to explore, but I'll bring in Ed first.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the subject of EV charging points, I fully understand the developer with this being a no-car site, and as Wendy said as well. However, I'm just wondering if this site does get planning permission, can we do anything as a council? We know we're putting 500 EV points in over this next year to perhaps put a couple of points next to this site so that we're, I hate the word future proofing, but if people take it, we know electric vehicles are coming, then at least the council are working with new developments where it's not necessary for the developer, but we can move it up on the list. So we have a couple of points in the street.
I think, Wendy, it'd be good if you wouldn't mind talking to just a general Ed's point in terms of interplay and how it would work with colleagues, and also Dan's point about the actual capacity for cycle charging on the brain, cycle storage on the site, and we may need Thomas on this as well. And I'll come back on Dan's point about the condition itself.
So just touching on the cycle parking, that cannot be provided on site because the ownership, the applicant actually owns, doesn't actually own much land outside the footprint of the building. So this the site location plan shows a very, very constrained site. So they only actually own a very small part outside the refuse store at the moment, and internally there is just no room to accommodate on-site cycle parking. Because we've explored that option, but the agent came back to say they just can't provide that on site. And with regards to parking, no, this has got a low PTAL, but I think there is general push to sort of try and promote sustainable mode of transport. And I think officers find that given this application is car-free, it's an opportunity to try and promote the car-free, try and reduce car ownership by suggesting to restrict any access to residence parking permit in the future. So we're hoping that in perpetuity, this development will not increase parking pressure in the locality.
So I'll just come on this one, and no doubt, actually, I'll tell you what, Jill first, and then I'll come back.
I think it's a little, I don't know. I think it's folly to think that this is never going to attract drivers or car owners. We've got to be realistic about this. And I don't mean to be rude or, unkind, but, let's be realistic. People own cars, whether they're electric or fossil fuel. And to imagine that not one single person as new development is going to own a car, I think is crazy. So I would please, I know we're trying to become a car-free world, but it's not going to happen. And it's certainly not going to happen for another 50 years. So let's be wise, let's future-proof. And if we can work together, let's do that. But I think it's, yeah, thank you. I think I've said enough.
So just to summarize some thinking on this as well. So the question before us on that particular condition is, given there is no CPZ at the minute, individuals are free to park their cars as they please. What we're talking about here is future-proofing that, and whether that means those residents will need to park their car somewhere else outside the CPZ area, or whether they'll need to give up their cars themselves. So the question there is for committee then, is there support to remove that particular condition from this application, bearing in mind existing car pressures won't be managed by the condition because the nature of the area is it does not yet have this service available. So I know Matt wants to speak. Does anyone else want to say anything on this? No, Matt?
So yes, I would like to ask the question whether we can, there are actually two 6.9s on page 74, but if we could remove the first 6.9, which is that in the future, the site is not within a CPZ, but we're going to just apply this in the future. I feel it's really, it's not great policy to be creating an us and them culture in the building decades ahead, potentially. And it really does worry me because we're not a sort of highly polluting panel. We've just voted for a car-free development in a PTAL rating of 6. This is 2. And there is a reason for those PTAL ratings. And if we want to encourage people not to drive, we need to build public transport, not punish people in the future for buying the top floor instead of the floor below of the same building. So I'm just wondering if it's possible to remove that paragraph, even though I do know that the applicant has already agreed.
So let's hold that thought a second. Is there, so I think we've already moved on to the comment section. Is there general agreement from the committee to do that? Is there a seconder? Yeah, Dan, everyone, the general agreement? Nods? Any objections to that? Fine. Okay. So we'll proceed on that basis. Officers, yeah, good. Happy? Thomas, are you happy with that?
No objections to that.
Can I just clarify that members wish to, just to refer you to paragraph 10.1 to remove obligation 3? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've just confirmed that. Fine. Okay, excellent. So any further comments on this scheme? Any further questions? Matt, and then we'll draw it to a close.
Thank you. It is sort of a question. One of the objections was that there is no additional fire escape, and it said that they may increase the risks of evacuating the building in case of a fire. I have been there, and the communal spaces are very narrow. Now, the PAC says this is not a material planning consideration under this prior approval. So I just want to check as a borough, so moving to comments as well, that we are checking fire safety. And I mean, none of the Lower Morden councillors are on this panel, but I'm sure they would want to know that when all the interested parties went down there this week, that somebody was checking that, and that we feel comfortable as a borough that we approve this building with no additional fire safety.
I think so. With fire safety, we're obviously guided by the actual regulations themselves, but also by building control when the site starts. And as someone who's has had several applications for just a simple house, I know they do a fantastic job. But I will ask officers to comment on that. But you know, I and you and I know everyone on this panel takes fire safety extremely seriously.
In terms of fire safety, just taking on this application, we cannot assess it just because it's not allowed in the order for this particular part. But in general, in the London plan does require fire safety statements to be submitted for all major applications. So that's something that is a requirement.
Can I add, there's obviously there are, when this is in the construction phase, there are particular material statements and various things that need to be taken into consideration when constructing this that need to align with fire safety. Any further questions? No. Okay, so I'll bring this to a close. To vote is going to be as it is on the order paper, recommending approval with the amended removal of the condition relating to the parking restrictions. So can I have those voting against? None. Not voting at all? None. Voting for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas, as well. So we're going to now move on to our last item. So this is 153 Links Road. I'm going to be joined by George, who's from our council's office as well. He will just be advising me on this item, and we'll just ask Lee to introduce this when he's finished his changeover.
Thank you, Chair. The property, as you can see, is an end of terrace property located on Links Road at the junction Jersey Road and Tooting. The site and the application for it is for the conversion of its current use as a C3 dwelling house into a 6-person small house of multiple occupation within use class 4 C4. Members refused a previous scheme on the site for a 7-person HMO back in December. The reasons for that were basically poorly designed overdevelopment of the site, resulting in poor quality living conditions and amenity for future occupiers, and issues with the waste management arrangements. The proposal now before members is for a 6-person scheme. Normally this would be within permitted development, but as this ward is covered by the Article 4 direction planning, permission is now required. This scheme now has 1 less bedroom than on the previous matter. Since the refusal, the applicant has undertaken a number of efforts to improve the site. The building has been painted, replaced the fencing, removed the old lean-to on the back of the property, and returfed the back garden. I'll show you some photographs on that. My site visit also showed in turn it's finished at a very high standard with attractive carpeting throughout. There's individual heating in the bedrooms, which have good quality beds, good quality bathrooms, a very large communal bathroom. The kitchen is very nicely finished, wood flooring, there's 2 sinks, 2 cookers, individual storage, fridges, dishwashers and washing machines. There's also a lounge and an upstairs working from home room in what was originally one of the bedrooms. The refuse is now commensurate with that use for a higher density family unit. A store would go into the back garden for the bikes. The drawings. Here we go. So, sorry, make that bigger. Oh, well, I'll do. So on the ground floor, you have a ensuite bedroom. Through the hallway here is the kitchen that I was talking about, and the living room to the side here, out into the back garden. On the first floor, we have the work from home room, a ensuite bedroom here and here, an ordinary non-ensuite bedroom on this level here, and then up in the loft we have 2 en-suites and the bathroom for the shared room for this scheme that only has 1 room, so that's provided there for people. Just some photographs of it. High quality beds, which I've tried, very comfortable. It's been painted. It's now going to have some obscure glazing on the ground floor to protect the privacy of the occupiers. Again, inside nice carpeting throughout, good quality furnishings. This is the lounge room, television, door out to the back garden. This is an example of the ensuite bathroom facilities in the ensuite rooms. Since this last came before members, the somewhat dilapidated fences have been replaced by new fencing. There's new turfing and the old lean-to has gone. This is inside the kitchen. So there are 2 sinks. Each resident will have 2 of these personal to them, plus there's some storage facilities for them as well, shared storage facilities for them. Nice high quality wooden flooring. Again, that's the other view with the other sink. Large communal dining room, extractor units. It's all very well finished out. There's me and the appliances. Kitchen facilities. This is the bathroom on the loft floor that would be for the person that doesn't have their own bathroom. It's quite spacious. It's got a very nice shower. It's all well fitted out. Each of the rooms has its own individual thermostat controls. I think that's it for the photographs. And previous to the last time this came before members, waste was considered on as 6 units. We now consider it as 6 individuals. So whereas before we would have been looking for a refuge wheelie bin for everybody and another bin for them. So we'd have had like sort of 12. Now it's on as if it was perhaps a multi-generational home with 6 adults living in it. So you would use the 2 40-litre units. So you therefore only have about 3 or 4 in the front garden. So it wouldn't look as cluttered as it would have been under the previous privacy. Previous policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee, for a very clear and detailed and user-tested visit as well. We've got no resident objectors or council objectors. We do have Ralph Taylor online and William Yardley in the room. I'm assuming, William, you're going to speak for 3 minutes on the item. Brent, take it away, please.
Hopefully this works. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Will Yardley. I'm the applicant. Thanks for listening to me today. I only want to make limited comments, as appreciate the officer's report provides a detailed review of the proposal and concludes with a positive recommendation. The property was previously a 5-bed rental. I didn't own it at that time. This application is for a 6-person HMO, so therefore possibly only one additional resident. I know that in other parts of the borough, this proposal would have been permitted development, and it's only due to the introduction of the immediate Article 4 direction in November that this formal planning act permission is required. I started to, sorry, is this picking me up? I started to work to convert the property in May 2022, prior to the Article 4 being introduced. And I feel like I've been caught out slightly by the immediate Article 4 direction. Any works undertaken have either been internal and not requiring planning permission, or external, like the redecoration work recently, or have been permitted development at the time. I've invested over 170,000 in the property to deliver a best-in-class HMO that would be targeted at young professionals and key workers. The case officer recently visited the property as discussed, and I'm pleased that he agrees that it's a very high standard of accommodation provided. The property would be managed by Urban Home, who are a local award-winning property management company, which works across South London and has managed over 3,000 tenants over a 11-year period. The council's HMO officer has confirmed that the proposal meets the requirements and standards of such accommodation and has no objection. Due to the immediate nature of the Article 4 direction brought in, I would be able to make a compensation claim for my investment costs, as well as the difference in value between a 6-bed HMO and a standard residential dwelling, the latter of which could be in the region of £200,000. I've sought barrister input on this matter, and I'd really like to stress this point. Whilst I do not wish at all to have to make a compensation claim, and that really isn't on my agenda, unfortunately, were this application refused, I'd have little option, as otherwise I'd be left in significant financial hardship. This would seem to be a poor use of local taxpayers' money, but again, I would very much like to stress that that is a complete last resort from me. Quickly, because I appreciate I might not have long left. The accommodation will be in line with core strategy policy CS8. This policy seeks to deliver smaller housing units to provide for those unable to compete financially in the housing market.
William, you're at time.
Sorry, okay.
It's all right. Before I ask Lee to come back on any points there, I don't normally do this, but I think that I think I would have found a lot more value if you spoke for 3 minutes on the application rather than lecturing me about legal risk.
Okay.
So appreciate that. I appreciate your concern. I appreciate the energy and effort. Absolutely. But the Article 4 is not just about you. We have a challenging issue with HMOs, in particular the East of the Borough. And this is the rule book we're going to have to play. And we accept the legal risk for the interim period that the Article 4 is coming in place, and welcome its full implementation at the end of the period in November. And in the meantime, I will pass to Lee if there's any additional points of planning concern that you'd like to raise.
No, I think there's nothing added to that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, any questions? Dan, and then Jill. Dan.
My paragraph is about my question is about paragraph 7.5.2. In this paragraph, in the middle, it states that the proposal is tailored towards a higher income bracket. Skip to the next sentence. Consequently, it's considered that noise disturbance and antisocial behavior should be given little weight. Are you implying that if it was aimed at a lower income bracket, there would be a greater concern for antisocial behavior?
Let's hold that for a second, Jill.
Yeah, I was going to commend you on the work that you've done, and I was absolutely delighted because we have a moral obligation to maintain the highest standards possible for people that live and move into this borough. And we've received good training and understanding of what Article 4 means and the risks if we were to potentially refuse an application. But I will not accept someone issuing veiled threats at this committee or these officers. And should you ever come back into this chamber again, sir, be warned.
Okay, so I think with the question and one from Sherry Ann, go for it.
Apologies. Could we just have some further clarity about the waste management plan and how it differs from the last application? And maybe just a bit more detail would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very helpful question. So I think summary, understanding socio-economic background, the implication for antisocial behaviour, and also waste management, the difference between the previous and the current scheme and how that benefits this current scheme between us.
Okay, yes. Yeah, there's no offence intended for that. It's just that the fact that we have the applicants trying to raise the standard with the quantity property. People are paying higher income to stay there. Therefore, there tends to be more incentive to look after the property that you're looking in sometimes at places where they're not, the less well looked after and not targeted to a different market for it. In terms of the waste management, previously you would have had a general refuge for everybody, a recycling for everybody, and a paper for everybody, and a food caddy for everybody. Now it's done on the number of people in there, and so they're covered with a 250-litre bin. So instead of having the 180 each, you'd share the 240s. So that's, you don't have so many amounts of bins.
I think in summary of the latter bit, it probably reduces confusion and clutter on the street scene as well, and also makes it probably a hell of a lot simpler for refuge colleagues to collect and return. Okay, another round of questions? Anything anyone wants to add for comments? If William, do you want to come in on a point of fact?
Yes, I'd just like to apologise. You know, my intention absolutely was not to threaten anyone or come across as terse. I apologise. I've obviously done some prep work and was trying to get through it. I'm a little bit nervous, but I do apologise if I've offended anyone.
We can understand sometimes the nature of this does cause nervousness, of course. Understand that. Thank you for putting that on the record. Your apologies. Ed, and then Kirsten.
Thank you, Chair. I do feel for Mr. Yardley, and it is a shame. I think we have had developers in here before with veiled threats and making ultimatums. I didn't take it that way. Perhaps as I've had my own business for 20 years, when you've got that amount of risk on the line, it's unfortunate with the timing with the Article 4. I agree with colleagues. We know why we brought it in. And unfortunately, some of the HMOs that this council sees and we see as councillors are quite grim. And I have to say, from what I've seen, I think Mr. Yardley has put more than required effort in. And certainly with that level of finish, I would think he will attract a higher rent. And I think it's a good example for other developers that might be contemplating HMOs to perhaps follow and perhaps play this back. They won't be in the same perhaps position as Mr. Yardley, but I think it's good as well that Mr. Yardley has apologised, and it is quite nervous coming into the chamber and speaking to us. So yeah, nothing lost there as far as I'm concerned. I quite like the scheme, actually. I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirsten, comments?
I just, sorry, it is a question more than a comment. I just wanted to know, how do we know that the 7th room is going to be maintained as a,
That's a
Kind of-
fair question. Yeah.
and you know, is that going to be, because obviously some of the rooms could have a couple, so there might be more than the amount of people we're expecting.
Yeah. I'll bring Lee back on in a second. Matt.
So yeah, I can understand if Will feels he's being caught out by the Article 4 direction. And you know, obviously, I just want you to know that this, from my reading of it, is a very good application. And the reason for the Article 4 direction is so we get a chance to look at it and we can see that you're not going to be subjecting residents to mold or those types of things. So we do need a variety of accommodation in this borough. And so I just want to put on record that I support the application, as not everyone can afford their own place. And I did read the parking concerns in the pack, but again, this is a PTAL rating of 2. And I popped down there last Friday night about 9 o'clock and I saw 16 spaces on Jersey Road. So I have no issue with approving this without any restrictions on parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Got one question. Any others questions or comments? Questions? Dan? Yep.
I want to go back to my earlier point because it was about the paragraph on noise, not about antisocial behavior, not just about antisocial behavior. So why do 6 rich people make less noise than 6 poor people?
I think let's split these questions. I think it'd be great to hear Kirsten's point about the about how we're going to enforce their condition in sense of the number of people in the property, particularly if you have a couple. Be good to hear about that. In terms of Dan's point, I'm very sympathetic to the point you're making, Dan, and I think it is noted for further follow-up. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. The application is for a 6-person per unit, so that is what the condition is according to do it that way. The room for the living room was put forward as a suggestion to the applicant to dress for a positive thing for residents to do there. If they're working from home, then they've got somewhere that they can go from there. So that within itself is confined to the 6th room, so we've got a space for that. And again, if there were more than those number of residents in there, then they would be a breach of the application, and it may get to the point where it also breached the requirements of the licensing, because this would also be licensed by the HMO department. So it's not just purely covered by planning. There is the HMO regulation as well.
Thank you. I'm confident to move this on to comments, and I know there was a number of colleagues who wanted to speak in comments. So I think it was Michael and Sherry-Ann.
Thank you, Chair. I accept Mr. Yardley's apology. Just as a general note, as we are being filmed and this is going out, it's never a good idea to come before the committee and try and strong arm the committee into making a decision one way or another. Just a general note to developers out there. I actually think that it's a good quality HMO and that the strength of the application is quite good. And I think that the strength of the application stood on its own merit, and the comments were actually probably a bit more of a detriment to the application. But leaving that at the door, we've seen some, I would say, poor quality HMOs in Graveney before. It's become a bit of a blight on the ward. So I'm glad that this is actually quite a good quality HMO, and I will be voting to approve it. But yes, understand the nerves, just be a bit more careful, I would say.
Thank you, Sherry-Ann, and as ward councillor.
Yes, as Aidan points out, I am the ward councillor, so I've got a few comments, if that's okay. So I'm pleased to see that the waste has been reconsidered, especially because Links Road has had some issues with waste in the past. So that's great improvement. And I do see that the applicant has made quite a number of improvements to the application since it last came forth. I understand and I accept your apology there, but I would just like to make it clear to everyone sort of watching that the Article 4 direction is excellent because it brings forth these HMOs to our committee in order for us to scrutinise and to use our local knowledge to inform how these applications are going to be approved, if there's any conditions that we need to bring in. Also, I live in the area also, so Links Road, it actually does have very good public transport connections. My family actually used to live on Links Road and used to take the bus. There's Tooting rail station there. Although it does have a low PTAL number, it is actually better than the PTAL number implies in this case, and it is on the border of a very good like PTAL level 4, so it's actually on the border of two PTAL things. So in that case, I am inclined to approve. I would say, just remind everybody on the committee that obviously I am also offended by the implication in the officer's report, but I think that's something definitely to take offline and discuss with officers there. But I would like to say yes, that my experience with antisocial behaviour is that it ranges amongst classes and amongst incomes, and I think that comment was maybe a little inappropriate for a planning application of this nature. But I completely understand that officers do not have a right of reply in these committees, so I do think it's something that's best taken offline. And thank you very much to the applicant for all their work on it. You nearly messed up with your speech, but I'm very happy to vote to approve this application and welcome good quality HMOs in our borough as we are rapidly growing. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin, do you have a comment?
Just a very brief comment. I mean, obviously, I welcome the apology as well. It's been brought in Article 4 because it's a considerable concern across the borough about the number of conversions which have taken place where residents have had no redress in terms of doing anything about them, and the standard of them in many cases has been substandard. I've dealt with a number in my ward, which has been extremely unfortunate. So it's right, as a council, we have introduced an Article 4 direction. In terms of this application, I'm happy in terms of the improved quality of the application, and in terms of the space with an Article 4 direction, obviously driving up standards is a big thing in relation to that. Also as well, although it's separate from the planning process, it is licensable even under existing legislation, which is a good thing in terms of the conditions. So I will be voted to approve that, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments before I add to the record? No? No, I echo everyone's comments, understand nerves on the night and the points made by colleagues as well. I think in terms of the specific, the contents of the application, I was really encouraged by taking on the officers' comments, or at least comments about the amenity space, and so much so that I've spoke to our policy team about how we can support further use of amenity for home working as well, which is an area, if you consider the target audience, an area that will probably need a bit more focus. And also, if we think about the mental health of individuals in these properties, if you were just to have the workspace within the room, it you know, gets a bit confining. Whereas if you have more of a more that communal feel because of that, that's quite a positive environment, and also is very conducive to work benefits and all the rest that flows from that. So that's just a comment for the record on that particular aspect of the scheme. Okay, colleagues, I'm confident I'm going to draw this to a vote. So if the questioners on the order paper to recommend the scheme, can I have those voting against? None. Those not voting? None. Those voting for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. It's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming in person. So so I'd just like to move on to, so just we're not taking item 8 at this time, moving on to item 9, so it's decision log. It's just to make colleagues aware that I delegated to officers a decision relating to a single dwelling, and it's ultimately because all the issues that were raised by residents were addressed in that particular scheme, and I have particular knowledge of the details from that. If any colleague wants to have discuss it in detail, please do grab me afterwards. We'll move on to, I'm going to take, unless Tim's going to speak on it, planning and appeals decisions. Tim, do you have anything to add on that? No? No? Fine. No, sorry, I didn't know if you would put the hat on, given Raymond's absence. So taking item 10, does any colleagues have anything to say on planning and appeal decisions? Any comments? No, I don't. And planning enforcement summary of current cases. So Raymond, I'm afraid, has given his apologies, unable to join us. Was planning to give a very detailed presentation about Burnbullock and some great work that went on there. We will come back to that, I promise you. But in the meantime, is there any comments or anything anyone wants to put on the record in terms of enforcement, other than how we very appreciate Raymond's efforts?
Just that I think since the last planning meeting, I think so, I lose track of the dates. We did have quite an informed meeting at the Burnbullock. Hannah Doody came down with the team. We actually went into the pub and it was really beyond worse than we expected. And there are a number of people living there in really subhuman conditions. Am I feeding back? Yeah. The environmental health and enforcement team went in a couple of days later, and I know that there's some very excellent work going on, and I'm really confident that some very positive progress is being made, not just in terms of the tidying up and the clearing up, protection of the building, but also the well-being of these poor folks that are living there in really ghastly conditions. So I look forward to the officers' reports, but again, the residents who are noticing the difference and the improvements are really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, and I think it's grateful to have yourself and Michael on the planning committee too, to align that work as well. So it's fantastic. Matt?
Just on the item 52 to 54 High Street, Wimbledon, which is in there about the roller shutters. I'd just like to check if when Raymond does come back, we can have a bit of an update generally on the site, because it has been vacant since COVID days. So it's not just the roller shutter that we need to look at here. Neither business that is advertised has ever been open on that site.
Noted, and also how we can delegate internally to see what can be done on the site. Fair point. Fantastic. If there's no other comments or questions at all, I draw this meeting to a close.